Hey everyone, I'm Ginny from Arbor Citizens Climate Lobby. We're really sad the summer festival was canceled and we can't talk to you in person about climate change and our work advocating for effective policies to tackle it, but we hope you enjoy the short quiz to test your knowledge. After you see each question, feel free to pause the video for a minute to think about your answer. We'll start off with a few questions about climate change and end with a few policy questions. Here we go. First question. When is the last time in history that the level of CO2 in the atmosphere was as high as it is now? A, more than 800,000 years ago, B, 10,000 years ago, or C, 2,000 years ago? Do you have your answer? Remember, you can pause if you want a minute to think. The answer is A, more than 800,000 years ago. Never in human history has the concentration of carbon dioxide been as high as it is right now. This graph shows the levels over the last 800,000 years, and right now we're at 417 parts per million, way up here, almost 15% higher than pre-industrial times. You can see that the levels fluctuated greatly over thousands of years, but it never got above 300 parts per million until we started burning fossil fuels. And the rate of increase since then is unprecedented. Next question. When was the first paper published that described the heat trapping capability of CO2? Is it A, 1856, B, 1925, or C, 1973? The answer is A, 1856. In 1856, Eunice Foote, an American scientist and women's rights advocate, published a paper in the American Journal of Science describing an experiment she performed with glass cylinders containing different gases, which she exposed to sunlight and then measured the temperature. Finding that the CO2 cylinder reached the highest temperature, she theorized that, quote, an atmosphere of that gas would give our Earth a high temperature. Several years later, in 1861, John Tyndall published laboratory results identifying carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas that absorbed heat rays. So you see, scientists have known for well over a century that CO2 in the atmosphere could trap heat. Next question. What is the last year we had a month where the global temperature was below average? Was it A, 2001, B, 1993, or C, 1984? The answer is C, 1984. December 1984 is the last time we had a month in which the global temperature was below average. This graph shows the deviation from the 20th century average, which is here, for each year since 1880. You can see that in 1976, it's the last year where the global temperature for the whole year was below average. Every year since then, the temperature has been above average, and it's clearly getting hotter and hotter. Here's another way to look at it. April 2020 was the 44th consecutive April and the 424th consecutive month where the temperature has been above average. Okay, that's the end of the climate change questions. How did you do? Were there any big surprises? We know that climate change is a problem, but what to do about it? Next up are a few questions about policy to tackle climate change. First, here's a little background. Economists across the political spectrum say that a carbon fee offers the most cost-effective lever to reduce carbon emissions at the scale and speed that is necessary. At Citizens Climate Lobby, we prefer a type of carbon fee in which all the revenue collected from the fee is split into equal shares and paid directly to every household in monthly payments. This policy is called carbon fee and dividend. All right, here's the first policy question. How does a carbon fee work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? A, by bankrupting fossil fuel companies. B, by setting limits on emissions. Or C, because when something costs more, people buy less of it. And the answer is C, when something costs more, people buy less of it. When fossil fuels become more expensive, everyone, consumers, businesses, manufacturers, utilities, entrepreneurs, and investors will find ways to avoid the added costs. Carbon-intensive goods and services will become more expensive than those produced with clean energy. A carbon price brings the costs of economic impacts into everyday economic decisions and crowdsources the best solutions. Next question. If all the revenue collected from a carbon fee is split into equal shares and paid monthly to every household, what percent of households will break even or come out ahead? That is, they'll get as much or more in their monthly dividend as they're paying due to the carbon fee. Is it A, 20%, B, 50%, or C, 70%? The answer is C, 70%. This graph is from a study by the U.S. Treasury Department showing the impact of carbon dividends on U.S. families. It's divided into income deciles. So the lowest 10% of incomes is here, and the highest 10% of incomes here. The size of the bars shows how much of a gain those in each income group will have with carbon dividends as a percent of income. You can see that those in the lowest 7 income groups, that is 70%, break even or come out ahead, with the lowest income groups having the biggest benefit. Why is that? Because the less money you have, the lower your carbon footprint on average. Okay, true or false? Bipartisan carbon fee and dividend bill was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2019. The answer is true. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, officially known as H.R. 763, was introduced in January 2019 by 1 Republican and 6 Democrats, and it now has 80 co-sponsors. This bill would impose a steadily rising fee on fossil fuels to be paid by the producers. The fee starts at $15 per ton of CO2 and increases every year by 10%, by $10. All of the revenue would be split into equal shares and given directly to households in monthly payments. Models show that it would reduce emissions significantly, save lives by reducing air pollution, create millions of jobs, and help families by putting extra money in their pockets. Next question. How much will emissions go down in 10 years under a carbon fee that starts at $15 per ton and increases by $10 per ton every year, as the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act does? Would emissions go down 15%, or B, 42%, or C, 60%? The answer is B, 42%. This graph is based on modeling by Resources for the Future, an economic research nonprofit, but other studies show similar outcomes. Furthermore, H.R. 763 has an emission reduction schedule with a target of 90% reduction by 2050. That's the end of the quiz. Hope you had fun and maybe learned a little something. Here are some things you can do from home if you want to help make progress on climate change. First, learn more about the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act at energyinnovationact.org. There, you can learn more details about the bill and see the growing list of endorsements. Or find out who your US senators and representatives are at govtrack.us and call or email them. Let them know you think climate change is an important issue to you. We hear over and over that members of Congress don't get many calls about climate change. Or finally, you can join Citizens Climate Lobby. We have almost 500 chapters throughout the US, including 21 in Michigan, and we're making a difference. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed.